Some stories disappear, some are erased, and some are waiting to be uncovered. The Dark Bureau.
A sprawling open-pit mine gleams under the harsh African sun. Its terraces etched deep into the earth, heavy trucks rumbling at the bottom, clouds of red dust circling the sky. Official accounts herald this site as a symbol of national ambition, the backbone of economic development able to fund schools, pave roads and power hospitals, a lever to finally convert natural riches into public prosperity. On paper, this is the nation's lifeblood. Export earnings, employment and government pride wrapped into a single, bustling scene. But the promise ends there. Hidden beneath the polish of televised ceremonies and glowing speeches, another machinery turns quietly. Every shipment of ore, each signed procurement, every contract moving through the state's bureaucracy, seen or unseen, feeds not only government coffers, but a complex, nearly invisible matrix of global interest that extends far beyond the borders. The flow of minerals extracted from the ground tells one story. The flow of money and influence, meticulously routed through offshore accounts, hidden partners and lawyers, reveals another, the true engine driving these institutions. Ironically, the greatest abnormality is not overt bribery or spectacular fraud. Those triggers grab headlines but deflect from a subtler, more dangerous mechanism, the routine, almost silent enabling of state capture by design. In the offices where procurement documents are drafted and contracts reviewed, the real anomaly is the silence. A silence around how deals are made, how prices are set, who benefits and why. State procurement becomes the quiet heart of the operation, where invisible arrangements set the rules for access and exclusion, and every layer of red tape can be unwound by those who know where the seams are stitched. Here, opacity is normalised. Opaque tenders are waved through as standard. Shell companies appear, dissolve, and resurface under new names. Consultancies, often with foreign staff clad in tailored suits, serve as intermediaries, their technical advice doubling as the thread that guides lucrative contracts through multiple back doors. On the surface, the procedure seems sound. Rows of legal contracts, spreadsheets with colourful graphs, government offices where paperwork is stamped, and auditors file reports. Ceremonies mark the departure of mineral exports. Dignitaries sign their names and smile for the flash bulbs. But this order is an illusion. What appears as diligent governance is, in fact, a carefully built ecosystem of enablement. Every element of the procurement process, from compliance paperwork to official oversight, is constructed to facilitate capture, not to uncover it. It is an order built to be exploited, a system engineered for manipulation rather than for transparency or public benefit. How does this cycle begin, and why does it prove so difficult to disrupt? It typically starts with the nation's urgent need, sometimes desperation, to attract foreign investment. Government leaders publicly promise a new era, a resource boom that will swell state reserves and transform daily life. Conferences are held, international investors fly in, and bold speeches connect resource extraction to national awakening. But beneath this hopeful surge, the foundational structures of procurement are quietly tailored. Mining rights are wrapped up in confidential contracts. Entire legal frameworks are recalibrated to suit a handful of firms. Local elites are cultivated as gatekeepers, their access to decision-making leveraged in exchange for loyalty and discretion. Foreign consultancies arrive, deploy teams in the guise of experts, and subtly rewrite the rules. Every loophole in the procurement system becomes an intentional opening for private gain. Every complexity in the contract's fine print, a shield for obscured interests. In this model, procurement serves a dual function. Outwardly, it is the engine of national growth. But inwardly, it rapidly morphs into a logistical labyrinth for private capture. Public officials paired with favoured bidders, consultants carving out fees far above market rates, and funds quietly rerouted outside national borders. The technical complexity of the contracts, pages of obscure clauses, annexes and cross-references, becomes the perfect camouflage for extraction. Multi-layered supply agreements are signed with offshore companies that exist only on paper. Intermediaries ferry funds through convoluted channels, while local compliance officers, overworked or overruled, see little choice but to sign off or step aside. Even the external audits, when they do materialise, often validate the numbers but never the substance. The rules of engagement are clear. Transparency is accepted only as theatre, never as a threat. Pressure for accountability eventually arises, but only in the face of crisis. Auditors reveal missing budgets, stalled construction sites, abandoned health clinics. Civil society groups start organising, tracking discrepancies between promised projects and lived reality. Whistleblowers inside government or consultancy firms begin leaking documents. Procurement contracts that, upon close inspection, show identical suspicious clauses. Journalists pour through hundreds of pages and trace payments. One consultancy is paid twice the market rate, another uses a subsidiary in a Caribbean tax haven. The story broadens. What appeared to be an isolated breach by one official or one company quickly expands into a network, a system of institutions, public and private, interlocked in mutual self-protection. As investigations progress, it becomes obvious that the institution itself, not just any single actor, is the real enabler. Responsibility blurs across state agencies, procurement departments, financial advisors and foreign partners. The system is robust, its routines iterative and designed to withstand the shock of exposure. No one break-in or headline upsets the underground circuitry. Instead, the cycle resets, the architecture stays intact, and the average official, when questioned, simply points to compliance forms and official minutes. The depth of the problem is revealed when analysts follow the money trail not to a handful of illicit accounts, but to astonishing systemic leakage. In nations across Central and Southern Africa, forensic audits find that state resource enterprises have signed away billions over a handful of years, sometimes amounts equivalent to half or more of the national operating budget. Technical audits in Zambia dissect the procurement of mining supplies, only to find external consultancies orchestrating deals at over 150% of standard market prices, the excess hidden in advisory or facilitation fees. In Central Africa, government treasuries pledge natural resources as collateral in offtake agreements structured so opaquely that actual public gains are impossible to verify. Yet the penalties for state non-compliance or efforts at reform are set so high as to scare off any reckoning. When politicians try to unwind these deals, contracts threaten financial penalties that would bankrupt the state. Outsiders, from international lenders to private lawyers, warn of lawsuits and credit downgrades. The system mutates with each investigation. New actors, new covers, new justifications. Consultancy brands change. Shell companies dissolve and reform. Contracts are revised to maintain the status quo, but with different handlers. For the citizens, the consequences run far deeper than the mere numbers denote. It is not simply lost funds. It is an erosion of social institutions. Infrastructure projects stall in half-completed phases, steel rusting by the roadside. Hospitals left unfinished deny care to thousands. Schools, meant to showcase the fruits of growth, are shuttered from lack of funds. The logic of democracy warps as citizens lose faith in public institutions. Elections become less about accountability and more about navigating an unmovable bureaucracy. Even after the most damning audits, the system proves resilient. Accountability for the enablers, consultants, lawyers, intermediaries, is rare. Profits siphoned abroad are almost never recovered. Truly significant penalties are elusive. For every punishment handed down, 5 more mechanisms emerge to keep the architecture of capture operational, sometimes evolving into ever more sophisticated, internationally networked forms. This quiet hollowing out of national institutions leaves once public agencies little more than empty shells, their original mandates subverted. Recognising the deeper structure, some governments attempt reforms, mandating independent procurement audits, banning single bidder tenders, insisting on open access to contracts. International watchdogs and lending agencies publicise grey lists and integrity pledges. Occasionally, a reform-minded leader steers a campaign for transparency, leveraging political capital for public procurement laws. Yet the structural obstacles remain daunting: institutional inertia, legal ambiguities written into older contracts, counter-campaigns by lobbyists and foreign consultancies fearing loss of market share. Even when momentum builds, the response from the capture ecosystem is swift. Layers of new consultancy agreements, reinvention of supplier chains, and adoption of digital procurement systems with closed, proprietary architecture all obscure true reform. Real transparency grinds down in the face of procedural fatigue and the sheer volume of paperwork. Internal whistleblowers often face retaliation, sidelined or silenced. Reforming agencies find themselves boxed in by legal challenges and international arbitration. Occasionally, the cost of inertia becomes untenable. A major infrastructure collapse, national protests, or fiscal crisis. Only at this breaking point do structural overhauls briefly seem possible, but even then, new actors are waiting, ready to step into the vacuum with promises of more efficient or professional management. The core architecture flexes, adapts, and persists. From the viewpoint of the institutions, the deeper tragedy is their own self-negation. State companies and treasuries, birthed to serve national interests, are quietly repurposed as private vaults. Internal controls, once meant to protect the public, are twisted into shields for secrecy. Compliance paperwork becomes a ritual, not a safeguard. State auditors, sometimes with genuine resolve, are undermined by procedural complexity or political interference. Years of effort and international investment in capacity building are gradually unpicked, the fruit of well-meaning reforms lost to a more nimble, adaptive network of enablers. Ironically, it is the very strength and resilience of these institutions that make them so valuable in the hands of those who would capture them. The veneer of state legitimacy allows private extraction to proceed in plain sight, disguised as governance. The wider world often fails to see these subtleties, focusing only on resource booms, production figures, trade growth, ballooning GDP. But inside, the reality is that the keys to the resource kingdom no longer rest with the state itself, but with a global come-domestic network of lawyers, consultants, lobbyists, and intermediaries, all operating with plausible deniability. As each exposure fades, contracts are quietly renegotiated, consultancies rebrand, new officials rotate through the ministry corridors. For the citizens, mineral wealth stays tantalizingly out of reach. The nation holds the resource, but not the power. Each new cycle begins as if from a fresh start, but the core machinery of enablement remains, quietly resetting the starting line for another round. Until the underlying structure is not just revised but disassembled, the world will continue to see resource-rich states holding minerals under their soil, while just out of sight someone else always holds the keys.